Sarah Martinez had always been small in stature, but her mind was sharp as a steel blade. At 26, she possessed a natural talent for understanding complex computer systems that most people twice her age struggled to comprehend. Her dark eyes held an intensity that reflected her passion for technology, and her gentle voice carried the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, even when others doubted her abilities. The naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, was a massive complex where thousands of personnel worked around the clock to maintain America's naval superiority. It was a world dominated by men in pressed uniforms, where rank mattered more than almost anything else, and where a young civilian woman in casual clothes was often overlooked or underestimated. Sarah had been contracted by the Navy's Information Technology Department to handle their most challenging technical problems, but she quickly discovered that her expertise meant little if people refused to take her seriously. On her first day, Sarah walked through the imposing gates of the naval base, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and a small toolbox in her hand. The security guards checked her credentials multiple times, their expressions suggesting they couldn't quite believe this young woman was there to fix their sophisticated computer systems. She smiled politely and waited patiently as they made phone calls to verify her clearance, already sensing the uphill battle she would face. The IT department was located in a sterile building filled with humming servers and blinking lights. When Sarah introduced herself to the department head, Commander Thompson, he looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. He was a man in his 50s who had spent most of his career dealing with traditional military personnel, and Sarah's appearance clearly didn't match his expectations of what a technical expert should look like. "So you're the contractor they sent us," Commander Thompson said, his tone suggesting disappointment. "I was expecting someone with more experience. Are you sure you can handle our systems? They're quite complex." Sarah maintained her professional demeanor despite feeling the sting of his assumption. "I understand your concerns, Commander. I've worked with similar naval systems before, and I'm confident I can resolve whatever issues you're experiencing. Perhaps you could show me to the problem areas?" The commander led her through a maze of corridors to a room filled with computer terminals that controlled various aspects of the base's operations. Several workstations were displaying error messages, and Sarah could immediately see signs of a network configuration problem that was causing system failures throughout the building. Her trained eye quickly identified patterns that suggested a deeper underlying issue with the base's entire network infrastructure. "These terminals have been acting up for weeks," Commander Thompson explained, gesturing dismissively at the malfunctioning equipment. "Our regular IT staff can't figure it out. They said we needed someone with specialized knowledge, though honestly, I'm not sure what." He paused, looking at Sarah with obvious doubt. "What someone like you can do that our trained personnel couldn't?" Sarah bit back her immediate response and instead approached the nearest terminal. Within minutes, she had identified the root cause of the problem, a misconfigured router that was creating conflicts across the entire network. It was exactly the type of complex issue that required both technical expertise and creative problem-solving skills. She knew she could fix it, but she also knew that demonstrating her abilities would be just the first step in earning respect. "I think I see the issue," Sarah said, pulling up diagnostic screens that most people wouldn't even know how to access. "Your network infrastructure has a routing conflict that's cascading through multiple systems. It's actually quite sophisticated in its complexity." Commander Thompson watched as Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up screens full of code and network diagrams that looked like hieroglyphics to him. Despite himself, he found himself impressed by her obvious familiarity with the systems, though he wasn't ready to admit it yet. As Sarah worked, other personnel began to gather around, curious about the young woman who was supposedly going to solve their persistent technical problems. Among them was Chief Petty Officer Reynolds, a gruff man with 30 years of naval experience who had seen countless contractors come and go. He crossed his arms and watched Sarah with the expression of someone who had been disappointed too many times to get his hopes up. "You know," Chief Reynolds said to no one in particular, his voice carrying across the room, "in my day, we didn't need civilians to fix our equipment. Real military personnel knew how to handle their own systems." Sarah heard the comment but continued working, her concentration unbroken. She had encountered this type of resistance before and knew that the best response was to let her work speak for itself. She methodically traced through the network architecture, identifying not just the immediate problem but also several potential issues that could cause future failures. After an hour of intensive work, Sarah stood up and addressed the group that had gathered around her workstation. "I've identified the primary issue and several secondary problems that would have caused more serious failures if left unaddressed. The main routing conflict can be resolved with a configuration change, but you also have security vulnerabilities in your firewall settings that need immediate attention." Commander Thompson looked skeptical. "Security vulnerabilities? Our systems are regularly audited by Navy cybersecurity specialists." "I'm sure they are," Sarah replied respectfully, "but sometimes fresh eyes can spot things that routine audits might miss." "Would you like me to show you what I've found?" For the next 30 minutes, Sarah walked the group through her analysis, explaining in clear, non-technical language exactly what was wrong with their systems and how her proposed solutions would not only fix the immediate problems but also strengthen their overall network security. Her presentation was thorough, professional, and demonstrated a level of understanding that even the most skeptical observers couldn't dismiss. Chief Reynolds, despite his initial resistance, found himself asking detailed questions about Sarah's findings. Her answers revealed not only technical expertise but also a deep understanding of how naval operations worked and why certain security measures were critical. Slowly, his expression began to change from skepticism to grudging respect. "All right," Commander Thompson finally said, though his tone remained cautious. "You can implement your fixes, but I want everything documented and reviewed by our senior staff before any major changes go live." Sarah nodded, understanding that trust had to be earned gradually. She spent the rest of the day carefully implementing her solutions while explaining each step to the observing personnel. Her approach was methodical and transparent, designed to build confidence in her abilities while also teaching the local staff how to maintain the improvements she was making. By the end of the first day, Sarah had successfully resolved the immediate network issues and had begun implementing enhanced security protocols. The terminals that had been displaying error messages were now functioning normally, and system performance across the building had noticeably improved. More importantly, she had begun to demonstrate that her expertise was real and valuable, even if some people were still reluctant to acknowledge it. As Sarah packed up her equipment at the end of the day, she reflected on the challenges ahead. She knew that fixing technical problems was often the easy part of her job. The real challenge was overcoming the assumptions and biases that prevented people from taking her seriously. She had encountered this pattern many times before in her career, but something about this assignment felt different. The stakes seemed higher, and the resistance more entrenched. Commander Thompson approached her as she prepared to leave. "I'll admit, you seem to know what you're doing," he said, his tone still formal but slightly less dismissive than it had been that morning. "We'll see how everything looks tomorrow." Sarah smiled politely and gathered her belongings. "Thank you, Commander. I'll be back tomorrow to continue working on the security enhancements and to address any other issues that might arise." As she walked through the naval base toward the exit, Sarah noticed how different the atmosphere felt compared to the civilian corporate environments where she usually worked. There was a sense of purpose and discipline here that she found inspiring, despite the challenges she faced in gaining acceptance. She had always respected the military's mission and felt honored to contribute her skills to supporting that mission, even when some personnel made it clear they questioned her qualifications. That evening, Sarah returned to her hotel room and spent several hours researching the base's history and mission. She wanted to understand not just the technical aspects of their systems but also the broader context of how her work contributed to naval operations. The more she learned about the base's role in national defense, the more determined she became to prove herself worthy of the trust they were slowly beginning to place in her. She also took time to review her approach and consider how she might better connect with the personnel she was working with. Sarah had learned over the years that technical expertise alone wasn't enough. She needed to build relationships and demonstrate that she understood and respected the culture she was entering. In a military environment, that meant showing not just competence but also reliability, integrity, and dedication to the mission. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the base early, determined to build on the small progress she had made the previous day. She had prepared additional analysis of the network systems and had identified several opportunities for improvements that went beyond just fixing the immediate problems. Her goal was to demonstrate that she could be a valuable long-term asset to the base's operations, not just someone who fixed problems and disappeared. Commander Thompson greeted her with a slightly warmer tone than the day before, and Sarah sensed that her work was beginning to speak for itself. However, she also knew that real acceptance would require more than just one successful day. In a military culture built on proven performance over time, she would need to consistently demonstrate her value before earning genuine respect. As she settled in for another day of work, Sarah felt a mixture of determination and nervousness. She knew that every decision she made and every problem she solved would be scrutinized more carefully than if she were a male contractor with the same qualifications. The pressure was intense, but it also motivated her to perform at the highest possible level. The foundation had been laid, but Sarah understood that the real test was just beginning. 3 weeks into her assignment, Sarah had settled into a routine of steady progress and gradual acceptance. The network issues she had initially resolved remained stable, and she had implemented several security improvements that had noticeably enhanced system performance across the base. While some personnel still regarded her with skepticism, others had begun to seek her out when they encountered technical problems, recognizing her unique ability to quickly diagnose and solve complex issues. Chief Petty Officer Reynolds had become one of her unlikely allies. Despite his initial resistance, he had observed Sarah's work closely and had come to appreciate not just her technical skills but also her professional attitude and respect for military protocols. He began introducing her to other personnel as the contractor who actually knows what she's doing, which was high praise coming from someone with his reputation and experience. Commander Thompson had also begun to warm up to Sarah, particularly after she had prevented a potential security breach by identifying and patching vulnerabilities that could have compromised sensitive communication systems. Her proactive approach to cybersecurity had impressed him, and he had started including her in planning meetings for upcoming system upgrades. However, Sarah was still fighting an uphill battle for recognition and respect. Many personnel continued to underestimate her abilities, and she frequently encountered situations where her recommendations were questioned or dismissed, only to be later validated when problems arose exactly as she had predicted. She maintained her professional demeanor through these frustrations, knowing that consistency and reliability would eventually speak louder than any complaints or confrontations. The turning point came on a Tuesday morning when Sarah was working on routine maintenance in the base's primary communications center. She was optimizing server configurations when she noticed unusual patterns in the network traffic that immediately caught her attention. The patterns were subtle, but her trained eye recognized signs that suggested someone was attempting to probe the system's defenses. Sarah quickly pulled up more detailed diagnostic screens and began tracing the suspicious activity. What she discovered sent a chill through her. Sophisticated malware had infiltrated the base's network and was systematically gathering information about communication protocols and security measures. The attack was so advanced that it had bypassed multiple layers of existing security and was operating almost invisibly within the system. Her heart raced as she realized the implications. This wasn't just a technical problem, it was a potential national security threat. The malware was specifically targeting naval communication systems and appeared to be designed to steal classified information about fleet movements and operational plans. Every minute that passed allowed the attackers to gather more sensitive data. Sarah immediately contacted Commander Thompson, her voice calm but urgent. "Commander, I need you to come to the communications center immediately. We have a serious security incident that requires immediate attention." Commander Thompson arrived within minutes, accompanied by the base's cybersecurity officer, Lieutenant Colonel Davis. Sarah had prepared a clear presentation of her findings, displaying the malware's activity patterns and demonstrating how it was infiltrating their most sensitive systems. "This is sophisticated state-sponsored malware," Sarah explained, pointing to the code signatures she had identified. "It's been operating in your system for at least several days, possibly longer. It's specifically designed to target naval communication protocols and has already accessed multiple classified databases." Lieutenant Colonel Davis, a seasoned cybersecurity expert, initially looked skeptical. Our systems are monitored continuously by Navy cybersecurity teams. If there was malware of this sophistication, it would have been detected by our automated systems. Sarah understood his skepticism but knew she had to convince them quickly. The malware uses advanced evasion techniques that mimic legitimate system processes. It's designed specifically to avoid detection by standard monitoring tools. But if you look at these traffic patterns and compare them to normal baseline activity, you can see the anomalies. She walked them through her analysis, showing how the malware had cleverly disguised its activities as routine system maintenance while actually exfiltrating sensitive data. Her explanation was detailed and technical, but she presented it in terms that non-experts could understand, demonstrating not just what the malware was doing but why it posed such a serious threat. Commander Thompson studied the evidence with growing concern. He had worked with enough cybersecurity incidents to recognize the seriousness of what Sarah was showing them. "How do we stop it?" he asked. "I can isolate the affected systems and begin the removal process," Sarah replied, "but we need to act quickly. The malware is programmed to accelerate its data collection if it detects any attempts at removal, so we'll have a narrow window to contain it before it tries to transmit everything it's gathered." Lieutenant Colonel Davis was still processing the implications. "You're saying this has been in our system for days without being detected by our security teams?" Sarah nodded gravely. "This is military-grade malware, probably developed by a nation-state actor with significant resources. It's designed specifically to evade the types of security measures that most military installations use. The fact that it targeted your communication systems suggests the attackers had detailed knowledge of Navy network architecture." The room fell silent as the full scope of the threat became clear. This wasn't just a technical problem, it was a potential intelligence disaster that could compromise ongoing naval operations and put personnel at risk. Commander Thompson made a quick decision. "What do you need to contain this?" Sarah had already mentally prepared her response. "I need administrative access to all affected systems, authorization to temporarily shut down non-essential communications, and a team of your best technical personnel to help with the isolation process. We also need to coordinate with Navy Cybersecurity Headquarters to ensure this attack isn't affecting other installations." For the next 6 hours, Sarah led an intensive effort to contain and eliminate the malware threat. She worked with military cybersecurity teams, coordinating her efforts with Navy headquarters and guiding local personnel through complex technical procedures. Her leadership during the crisis was calm, decisive, and highly effective. The malware proved to be even more sophisticated than she had initially realized. It had multiple layers of protection and was designed to corrupt data if removal was attempted incorrectly. Sarah had to develop custom tools and procedures to safely extract the malicious code without triggering its destructive protocols. Throughout the crisis, Sarah demonstrated not just technical expertise but also the ability to work effectively under extreme pressure. She coordinated with multiple teams, maintained clear communication with leadership, and made split-second decisions that prevented the situation from becoming even worse. Her performance during those critical hours impressed everyone who worked with her. By late afternoon, Sarah had successfully contained the malware and begun the process of removing it from the infected systems. She had also identified how the malware had initially penetrated their defenses and had implemented additional security measures to prevent similar attacks in the future. As the immediate crisis passed, Commander Thompson and Lieutenant Colonel Davis began to fully appreciate what Sarah had accomplished. Not only had she detected a sophisticated attack that had evaded their existing security measures, but she had also led the response effort that prevented a potential intelligence catastrophe. "I need to ask you something," Lieutenant Colonel Davis said as they reviewed the final stages of the malware removal. "How did you spot this when our automated systems missed it completely?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. Experience with advanced persistent threats, combined with a different perspective on normal system behavior. I've seen similar attack patterns in other environments, and I spend a lot of time studying the latest cyber warfare techniques. Sometimes an outsider's view can catch things that routine monitoring misses. The truth was more complex than that simple explanation. Sarah had developed an intuitive understanding of how computer systems should behave, combined with extensive knowledge of cutting-edge cyber threats. Her ability to spot subtle anomalies came from years of experience and a natural talent for pattern recognition that even she couldn't fully explain. Word of the incident and Sarah's role in resolving it quickly spread throughout the base. Personnel who had previously dismissed her as just another contractor began to see her in a completely different light. She had not only demonstrated exceptional technical skills but had also shown the kind of calm competence under pressure that military personnel valued above almost everything else. Chief Petty Officer Reynolds sought her out later that evening as she was finishing her documentation of the incident. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "What you did today, that was outstanding work. You probably saved this base from a major security compromise." Sarah appreciated his words but remained humble. "I was just doing my job, Chief. This is exactly the kind of threat these systems face, and it's why cybersecurity has to be taken so seriously." "No," Reynolds insisted. "This was more than just doing your job. You went above and beyond what anyone expected, and you handled the whole situation like a seasoned professional. The way you led that response team, that was leadership under fire." Commander Thompson had similar sentiments when he met with Sarah the following morning. "I'll be honest with you," he said. "When you first arrived here, I wasn't sure what to expect. But what you accomplished yesterday demonstrated abilities that go far beyond just technical knowledge. You showed real leadership and judgment under the most difficult circumstances." Sarah felt a sense of validation that went beyond just professional satisfaction. She had proven not just her technical capabilities but also her ability to contribute meaningfully to the base's mission. The crisis had been a test she hadn't expected, but it had also been an opportunity to demonstrate her true value. The incident had also changed how other personnel interacted with her. Instead of being seen as an outsider who was temporarily fixing their problems, she was now viewed as a valuable team member whose expertise could be crucial in protecting the base's operations. People sought her advice on security matters and included her in discussions about future system improvements. However, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of earning genuine respect and acceptance. One successful crisis response was significant, but lasting credibility would require continued excellent performance over time. She was determined to build on this foundation and prove that the confidence people were beginning to place in her was fully justified. 6 months had passed since Sarah first walked through the gates of the Norfolk Naval Base, and her reputation had grown significantly. The malware incident had marked a turning point in how people viewed her, but it was her consistent performance over the following months that had truly established her credibility. She was no longer seen as just a contractor brought in to fix specific problems. She had become an integral part of the base's technical infrastructure and planning. Commander Thompson had begun including Sarah in high-level meetings about base modernization and cybersecurity strategy. Her insights had proven valuable not just for solving immediate problems but for anticipating future challenges and ensuring that new systems were designed with robust security from the beginning. She had also developed strong working relationships with personnel at all levels, from junior technicians to senior officers. Chief Petty Officer Reynolds had become one of her strongest advocates, frequently praising her work to other personnel and recommending her for increasingly complex assignments. He had observed how she mentored younger technicians and shared knowledge freely, always focused on improving the overall capability of the team rather than just showcasing her own expertise. Despite these improvements in acceptance and recognition, Sarah still faced occasional challenges from personnel who questioned her authority or expertise. Some of these challenges were based on gender bias, others on civilian versus military cultural differences, and some simply on resistance to change. Sarah had learned to navigate these situations with patience and professionalism, always focusing on results rather than confrontation. Her approach to building relationships had evolved significantly during her time at the base. She had learned to communicate in ways that resonated with military culture, emphasizing mission readiness, operational security, and team effectiveness. She had also gained a deeper appreciation for the unique pressures and responsibilities that military personnel faced, which helped her tailor her technical solutions to better support their operational needs. The ultimate test of Sarah's standing at the base came on a Friday afternoon in late autumn. She was working in the communications center when alarms began sounding throughout the building. Within minutes, the base's emergency response protocols were activated, and personnel began implementing crisis management procedures that Sarah had only heard about in briefings. Commander Thompson's voice crackled over the intercom system. All senior technical personnel report to the command center immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Sarah grabbed her laptop and emergency toolkit, uncertain whether she qualified as senior technical personnel but knowing that her skills might be needed regardless of her official status. When she arrived at the command center, she found a scene of controlled chaos as officers and technicians worked to assess and respond to what appeared to be a major systems failure. Admiral Richardson, the base commander whom Sarah had only seen from a distance, was coordinating the response from the center of the room. He was an imposing figure with decades of naval experience, known for his strategic thinking and decisive leadership. Sarah had heard that he was scheduled to retire soon and was considered one of the Navy's most respected officers. "What's our status?" Admiral Richardson demanded as Sarah entered the room. Lieutenant Colonel Davis, who had become one of Sarah's supporters since the malware incident, provided a rapid briefing. "Sir, we're experiencing cascading failures across multiple critical systems. Communications, navigation, weapons control, and environmental systems are all showing various degrees of malfunction. Initial assessment suggests this isn't a cyber attack but rather a fundamental infrastructure failure." Sarah listened to the technical reports with growing concern. The symptoms being described suggested a problem with the base's primary power management system, which controlled electrical distribution to all major facilities. If that system failed completely, the entire base could lose power, potentially compromising mission-critical operations and putting personnel at risk. Admiral Richardson's gaze swept across the room, taking in the assembled personnel. "I need options, and I need them quickly. What caused this, and how do we fix it?" The base's chief electrical engineer, Commander Walsh, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. "Sir, our preliminary analysis suggests the problem is in the main power distribution control system. It's a highly complex network that manages electrical flow to all base facilities. If it continues to fail, we could lose power base-wide within the next few hours." "Can you fix it?" Admiral Richardson asked directly. Commander Walsh hesitated. "Sir, the system is incredibly complex, and we're not entirely sure what's causing the cascading failures. We have technicians working on it, but, honestly, this is beyond our normal expertise. We may need to bring in specialists from outside contractors." Sarah felt a moment of internal conflict. She had experience with power management systems and recognized the symptoms being described, but speaking up in this high-level crisis meeting would be presumptuous for someone in her position. However, she also knew that lives and mission readiness could be at stake if the power failure continued to escalate. Admiral Richardson noticed her presence in the room. "You're the contractor who handled the cybersecurity incident a few months back," he said, his tone suggesting he remembered her work. "Do you have any insights into this situation?" Sarah felt every eye in the room turn to her. This was a moment that could define not just her immediate future but her entire career. She took a deep breath and spoke with quiet confidence. "Admiral, based on the symptoms being described, I believe this is a software logic failure in the power management system's control algorithms. The hardware is probably functioning correctly, but the software that controls power distribution is making incorrect decisions that are causing the cascading failures." Commander Walsh looked skeptical. The power management system software was installed and certified by Navy engineers. It's been running reliably for 3 years. Sarah nodded respectfully. "I understand, Commander. But complex systems like this can develop logic failures over time, especially when they encounter scenarios that weren't fully anticipated during the original programming. The pattern of failures being reported suggests the system is stuck in a feedback loop, trying to solve a problem that its current algorithms can't properly address." Admiral Richardson studied Sarah intently. "Are you saying you can fix it?" "I believe so, sir, but I'd need access to the core control systems and permission to modify the programming logic. It would also be a high-risk operation because making changes to a failing system could potentially accelerate the failure if done incorrectly."
The room fell silent as Admiral Richardson considered his options.
The base's regular technical staff was struggling with the crisis, outside contractors would take hours or days to arrive and assess the situation, and, meanwhile, critical systems continued to fail. Sarah represented an available resource with relevant expertise, but trusting such a critical operation to a civilian contractor was an enormous risk.
"What's your assessment of the timeline?" Admiral Richardson asked Sarah directly.
Sarah had been mentally calculating based on the failure patterns she had observed. If the system continues failing at the current rate, you'll likely lose all non-essential power within 2 hours and critical systems within 4 hours. However, if I can access the control algorithms and identify the logic error, I might be able to stabilize the system and prevent further failures.
Lieutenant Colonel Davis spoke up. "Admiral, I've worked with Sarah on several critical issues over the past months. Her technical judgment has been consistently excellent, and she's proven herself under pressure before."
Chief Petty Officer Reynolds, who had somehow appeared in the command center despite not being part of the senior staff, added his voice, "Sir, she's the best technical mind we have on this base.
If anyone can solve this, it's her."
Admiral Richardson made his decision with the decisiveness that had made him a respected leader.
"All right, you have access to whatever you need.
Commander Walsh, provide her with full administrative access to the power management systems.
I want progress reports every 15 minutes.
For the next 3 hours, Sarah worked with intense focus while the entire base's leadership watched her progress. She had to navigate through incredibly complex software systems while the power failures continued around her, creating additional pressure as lights flickered and backup systems activated throughout the command center.
The problem proved to be even more challenging than she had initially anticipated.
The power management system software had indeed developed a logic error, but it was buried deep within millions of lines of code and was triggered by a rare combination of circumstances that occurred only under specific load conditions. Finding and fixing the error required not just technical expertise but also creative problem-solving and the ability to work effectively while under enormous pressure. Sarah methodically traced through the system's decision-making processes, identifying where the logic was breaking down and causing the cascading failures. She had to understand not just how the software was supposed to work but also how the physical power distribution system operated, requiring her to quickly learn about electrical engineering principles she hadn't used since college. As she worked, Sarah provided regular updates to Admiral Richardson and his staff, explaining in clear terms what she was finding and what steps she was taking to resolve the crisis. Her ability to communicate complex technical information to non-technical decision-makers proved almost as valuable as her problem-solving skills. The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered that the system's logic error was triggered by a specific sequence of power demand changes that had never occurred during the original testing phase. The software was trying to optimize power distribution based on algorithms that worked well under normal conditions but failed catastrophically when faced with the unusual load patterns that had developed as the base's operations had evolved over 3 years.
"I found it," Sarah announced to the tense command center. "The system is stuck in a recursive optimization loop. It's trying to solve a power distribution problem that its current algorithms interpret as impossible, so it keeps trying different solutions that make the problem worse instead of better." Admiral Richardson looked up from the status reports he had been reviewing. "Can you fix it?" Sarah nodded, though her expression remained serious.
"I can, but I need to essentially rewrite a critical part of the control algorithm while the system is running. There's some risk that modifying the code could cause immediate total system failure, but if I don't fix it, total failure is inevitable anyway." "Do it," Admiral Richardson ordered without hesitation. For the next 45 minutes, Sarah made careful modifications to the power management software while the entire base held its breath. She had to work incrementally, testing each change before implementing the next one, all while ensuring that her modifications didn't trigger the system's safety protocols that would shut down power completely. Finally, as Sarah implemented the last component of her fix, the cascade of system failures stopped. Warning alarms fell silent, status indicators shifted from red to green, and normal power distribution resumed throughout the base. The crisis was over. Admiral Richardson stood and addressed the room. "Outstanding work, everyone. Especially you," he said, looking directly at Sarah.
That was exceptional performance under the most difficult circumstances. The command center erupted in applause, but Sarah felt too exhausted to fully appreciate the moment. She had just prevented a potential disaster that could have compromised the base's operational readiness and put personnel at risk. More importantly, she had proven herself capable of performing at the highest level when everything was on the line. The morning after the power crisis, Sarah arrived at the base to find that word of her performance had spread throughout the entire installation. Personnel who had never spoken to her before approached to offer congratulations and thanks. The story of how the tech support girl, as she had been dismissively called by some, had prevented a base-wide catastrophe had taken on almost legendary proportions overnight. Commander Thompson greeted her with a smile broader than any she had seen from him in 6 months. "Sarah, I have to tell you, Admiral Richardson has been singing your praises to everyone who will listen. What you accomplished yesterday was truly extraordinary." Sarah appreciated the recognition but remained focused on ensuring that the fixes she had implemented were stable and that similar problems wouldn't occur in the future. She spent the morning reviewing system logs and monitoring power distribution patterns to verify that her emergency modifications were holding up under normal operational conditions. Chief Petty Officer Reynolds found her in the power management control room around midday. His expression was serious, but Sarah could see pride in his eyes. "You need to know something," he said. "Yesterday, when you were working on that system, Admiral Richardson told us that in 40 years of naval service, he'd rarely seen anyone demonstrate that level of competence under pressure. He said you handled yourself like a seasoned military officer." The praise meant more to Sarah than she could express. Throughout her career, she had worked hard to prove herself in male-dominated technical fields, but earning recognition from someone with Admiral Richardson's experience and reputation felt like a validation of everything she had worked to achieve. Later that afternoon, Sarah received an unexpected summons to Admiral Richardson's office. She had never been to the Admiral's private office before, and, as she walked through the corridors leading to the base's senior leadership area, she wondered what this meeting might mean for her future at the base. Admiral Richardson's office reflected his decades of service, with commendations, photographs, and memorabilia covering the walls. He stood as Sarah entered, a gesture of respect that surprised her given the vast difference in their ranks and status. "Please, sit down," Admiral Richardson said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I wanted to speak with you personally about yesterday's events and discuss your future here." Sarah sat down, uncertain what to expect but sensing that this conversation would be significant. "First," Admiral Richardson continued, "I want you to understand the full scope of what you prevented yesterday. A complete base power failure would have compromised multiple ongoing operations, potentially putting lives at risk and certainly affecting our readiness status. Your technical expertise and leadership under pressure prevented what could have been a serious operational crisis." He paused, studying Sarah's reaction. "But, more than that, you demonstrated qualities that are essential in military leadership: calm decision-making under pressure, clear communication during crisis situations, and the moral courage to take responsibility when the stakes are highest. These are not just technical skills, they're leadership capabilities." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and humility. "Thank you, Admiral. I was just doing what needed to be done." "No," Admiral Richardson said firmly. "What you did went far beyond just doing what needed to be done. You took charge of a crisis situation, provided clear guidance to senior personnel, and executed a complex technical solution under extreme time pressure. That's the kind of performance that defines leaders." He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I've been in the Navy for 40 years, and I've learned to recognize exceptional talent when I see it. You have capabilities that go far beyond just technical expertise. Have you ever considered military service?" The question caught Sarah completely off guard. She had never thought about joining the military, despite her growing respect for military culture and mission. Honestly, Admiral, it's never occurred to me. I've always been focused on my technical career." Admiral Richardson nodded. "I understand. But I want you to think about it. The Navy needs people with your combination of technical expertise and leadership potential.
There are programs for bringing experienced professionals into military service at appropriate ranks, and someone with your capabilities could make significant contributions to naval operations. Sarah was intrigued but also uncertain. Military service would represent a fundamental change in her life and career path. What would that look like, hypothetically? Given your education, experience, and demonstrated performance, you would likely be eligible for direct commission as an officer, Admiral Richardson explained. You would attend officer training programs designed for professionals entering military service, and then be assigned to positions where your technical expertise and leadership abilities could be most valuable. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Admiral Richardson describing various opportunities within the Navy's technical branches and explaining how Sarah's skills could contribute to naval operations at a strategic level. By the end of the meeting, Sarah had agreed to seriously consider military service, though she asked for time to think about such a major life decision. As word of Admiral Richardson's interest in recruiting Sarah spread through the base, her status underwent another dramatic transformation. Personnel who had once questioned her qualifications now spoke of her as someone being personally recruited by the base commander. The respect she had earned through her technical performance was now amplified by recognition from the highest levels of base leadership. Commander Thompson approached her later that week with an unusual request. "Sarah, we're having a base-wide ceremony next Friday to recognize outstanding contributions to operational readiness. Admiral Richardson has specifically requested that you be recognized for your role in preventing the power crisis." Sarah felt honored but also somewhat uncomfortable with the attention. "I appreciate the recognition, Commander, but I was just doing my job." "That's exactly the attitude that makes you so valuable," Commander Thompson replied. "But this ceremony is about more than just recognizing your technical work. It's about acknowledging that exceptional performance can come from unexpected sources and that expertise and dedication matter more than rank or background." The ceremony took place the following Friday in the base's main auditorium, with hundreds of personnel in attendance. Sarah had been asked to wear professional attire rather than her usual casual work clothes, and she felt somewhat out of place among all the military uniforms until she remembered that her contributions were just as valuable as anyone else's. Admiral Richardson delivered the opening remarks, speaking about the importance of recognizing excellence in all its forms and acknowledging that the Navy's mission was supported by dedicated professionals from many different backgrounds. He then called Sarah to the front of the auditorium. "It gives me great pleasure," Admiral Richardson announced, "to recognize Sarah Martinez for exceptional technical expertise and leadership during a critical crisis situation. Her quick thinking, technical mastery, and calm performance under pressure prevented a potentially serious operational disruption and demonstrated the highest standards of professional excellence." As Admiral Richardson presented Sarah with a formal commendation, the auditorium erupted in sustained applause. But what happened next surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. 3 other admirals who had been invited to the ceremony stood up from their seats in the front row, and, in an unprecedented gesture, they each offered Sarah a formal military salute. The symbolism was unmistakable and profound. These senior officers, with centuries of combined military experience, were offering the same respect to Sarah that they would show to a fellow officer. The gesture acknowledged not just her technical contributions but her demonstration of military virtues, competence, courage, and commitment to mission accomplishment. The auditorium fell silent as the significance of the moment became clear to everyone present. Sarah, overwhelmed by the unexpected honor, instinctively returned the salutes as best she could, though she had never been trained in military protocol. The image of the 4 admirals saluting the young woman who had once been dismissed as just tech support girl would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it. Admiral Richardson stepped closer to Sarah and spoke quietly so only she could hear. "You've earned this recognition, and these salutes represent genuine respect for what you've accomplished. I hope this helps you understand the impact you've had and the potential you have for even greater contributions." After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by dozens of personnel wanting to congratulate her and express their appreciation for her work. The transformation in how people viewed her was complete and dramatic. She was no longer an outsider trying to prove herself, she was a valued member of the team whose contributions were recognized at the highest levels. Chief Petty Officer Reynolds found her after the crowd had thinned out. You know, he said with a grin, I've been in the Navy for 30 years, and I've never seen 4 admirals salute a civilian contractor. You've accomplished something truly special here. Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months earlier, she had walked through the base gates as an unknown contractor whose qualifications were questioned by almost everyone she met. Through consistent excellent performance, dedication to the mission, and the courage to step up during crisis situations, she had earned recognition that exceeded anything she had imagined possible. But, perhaps most importantly, Sarah had discovered capabilities within herself that she hadn't known existed. She had always been confident in her technical skills, but the experiences at the naval base had revealed her potential for leadership under pressure and her ability to contribute meaningfully to missions that were larger than her individual expertise. As she prepared to leave the base that afternoon, Sarah carried with her both the formal commendation from Admiral Richardson and, something more valuable, the knowledge that excellence and dedication could overcome any initial doubts or prejudices. She had proven to herself and to everyone around her that competence, character, and commitment were more important than any assumptions people might make based on appearance, background, or initial impressions. The young woman who had once been dismissed as tech support girl had become someone worthy of salutes from admirals, and, in the process, she had transformed not just how others saw her, but how she saw herself and her own potential for making a difference in the world. Admiral Richardson's offer of military service remained on the table, and Sarah knew she would need to make a decision soon. But, regardless of whether she chose to join the Navy or continue her civilian career, she would carry with her the confidence that came from proving herself at the highest levels of performance and earning recognition from people whose opinions truly mattered. The salutes from 4 admirals represented more than just recognition of her past achievements, they represented acknowledgement of her potential for future contributions to missions that served something greater than herself. It was a responsibility Sarah felt honored to accept, whatever path her career might take from this point forward.